As you can see, we went over the triangle congruence, which was part one, and those were all postulates: the side, 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 the side angle, side, and the angle, side, angle postulates. Now we're going to go into part two of triangle congruence, which talks about theorems of congruence. The first theorem we're going to discuss is the angle, angle, side congruence theorem. And this one states that if two angles and a non-included side of one triangle are congruent to two angles and the corresponding non-included side of the second triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. And showing you some examples is that you see these two angles and a non-included side. We have these two angles and the other non-included side. So as you can see, for two angles, there are actually two non-included sides. Now let's look at this relationship of these two angles. Here's one non-included side, and here's the other non-included side. And the final angle, you have these two angles and the non-included side, and these two angles and the non-included side. Now, given this question, which statement proves the triangles are congruent with the angle-angle side theorem? And this is going to have more than one answer. So you have to look at the relationship of the theorem, which states that you have two angles and a non-included side. See which ones can apply to this. And now we're going to look at some of the right triangle congruence theorems. And let's look at the sides and the angles of a right triangle. First of all, we have the right angle, and directly across, which is its corresponding side, is a hypotenuse. Then we have two acute angles, and the corresponding side to the acute angles are always called legs. So here's your leg with this angle, and here's the leg that goes with this angle. The HL theorem, which is a hypotenuse side congruence theorem, it states that if you have a right triangle, as long as you have congruent hypotenuse, corresponding hypotenuse, as well as a corresponding side that are congruent, then the triangles are congruent. Here is an example. If you have the hypotenuse and the side, here's another example of the theorem. And here's a third example of the theorem. I'm sorry, it's actually getting into a new theorem. This is the HA, or hypotenuse angle theorem. And this one is if you have the two triangles, they're both right triangles, if you have the hypotenuse and an angle that is congruent, and so they're directly corresponding, then the triangles are congruent. And here's an example. So we have the hypotenuse with an angle. Hypotenuse with a corresponding angle to the triangle. Again, here's the angle with hypotenuse. And this one is called the leg-leg theorem, but do you see anything in common with this? This is the leg-leg theorem, but doesn't look an awful lot like the side angle or side postulate. Yeah, it is actually, but sometimes people relate it to the LL congruence theorem, which states that if you have two legs that are congruent in a right triangle, then you have it. But also look at this right here. Here is a side, here's an angle, here's a side. So with the leg-leg theorem, there's an awful lot of other congruent theorems or postulates that can go with it. And here's an example of that actual theorem. You can see the legs are congruent. This is a leg angle theorem, which states that if you have a leg and an acute angle, then with a right triangle, then you can state the congruence of the triangles. But again, if you look at it, let's just look at the next page. If you look, you have this right here, and you see the angle. But what other things do you see here? Isn't this the angle, side, angle postulate? Wouldn't a 90-degree angle be equal to a 90-degree angle? So here are two angles with the included side, which is the angle, side, angle postulate. So a lot of times the LL or the LA theorems we won't really use just because we have the other ones that we can use. Okay, looking at this, you need to answer the question, explain why the two triangles are congruent. And as you can see, you're using one of the right triangle congruence. So see if you can get that one. Here's another. What kind of congruence do you see here? Again, let's see what you can find with this one. Here's another. And another. Now, try and figure out which statement proves the triangle is congruent using the hypotenuse angle theorem. Which statement proves triangles congruent with the hypotenuse leg theorem? And this concludes, this is your last question, and we'll talk about this in class. I'm actually going to give you some papers that you can actually practice recognizing the special properties of the triangles and see which statement can be applied to them.